There we go. So it's going now. So really, let's start off first of all with introduction. So first of all, I guess probably if you're still hanging on now after all this time, you probably know who I am, or certainly know who I am now. My background is in BI and data warehousing. I suppose our company's background in that is in that. And so somebody's asked there, are we showing the slides afterwards? So yes, we are. If there's any issue with the sound or anything, let Oscar know, who's on the call as well, and he'll kind of message me. But we're certainly recording this, and the slides will be available. Okay, so my background is in BI and data warehousing, and a lot of the people that we work with come from this area as well. You can contact me, details on there. I've written some books about Oracle BI. But over the last couple of years, I've been particularly focusing on big data, because it's been the natural kind of progression, I think, for a lot of our customers to go from, say, relational databases, data warehouses, and so on, to into this sort of area. And I'll try and explain why as we go on. Our company, Rittman Mead, we have offices in the UK and in Brussels, and hopefully still, and in the US. We have consultants who work on implementations. We do training and support and so on. And again, our capabilities have extended really in the last kind of couple of years to cover these new technologies. And again, I'll try and explain why in this session. So the background to this really, and this particular presentation on this thing called Customer 360. Okay, so the background to this is kind of big data. So in my presentations that I gave, the last two, we talked about everybody talking about big data. So and no doubt you understand there's these concepts of variety and velocity and all these different kind of volumes of data and explosion and so on. And certainly for the first few years, a lot of people we work with, a lot of customers we work with, were just interested almost for the sake of it really in big data, because there were businesses and opportunities being born out of our big data, things like Uber and so on, that clearly were kind of disrupting the industries and so on. IT could use big data and Hadoop technologies to do things a lot cheaper, and so the platform itself was interesting really. But really, and this is a parallel to what's happened with things like data warehouses and BI and so on over the years. The platform itself is kind of not enough now really, and So what's happened, again, a lot of our customers recently now have been saying, well, I don't want to buy just another platform. I don't want to buy another set of tools to go and build something with. What they're interested in is more than that, really. And so what customers are looking for now, and this is a parallel to what's happening with things like BI apps and sort of like and various kind of, I suppose, vertical applications for analytics and so on, is customers are expecting now to go out and buy solutions really to run on Hadoop. So the platform itself is not sufficient. So most customers now that we speak to are not only implementing Hadoop platforms and things like that, but they're also looking at building applications and purchasing prepackaged applications from various kind of vendors. And so Oracle, for example, talk about there being like an app store that runs on the big data appliance. You get various kind of vertical vendors that are looking to provide solutions for certain industries. Looking at this here, we've got things like fraud prevention and so on there. So really, same as with kind of BI and analytics, the platform itself isn't sufficient now really, and people expect now to go out and either buy or implement solutions from vendors around big data. Okay, so there's lots of kind of examples here, and these are from some Oracle slides. They've talked about different kind of vertical markets and the various kind of use cases and applications that big data can have. So, one way of looking at this is to say, as the meme goes, and this one does not simply just deploy a big data platform. That in itself is not sufficient now, really. Okay, in the same way that you don't just deploy a BI platform and don't think about how you're going to use it, and don't think about packaged apps and buying in kind of IP from Oracle, for example, around particular verticals. But the number one hyped big data application area that we see at the moment is this thing called Customer 360. Now, I kind of foolishly offered to kind of bottom this out really for myself and for our company in Oracle as to what was Customer 360. We see this talked about a lot. Most of the Hadoop vendors have this concept of what they call Customer 360, where we'll see in a moment in this presentation what it means really, but it can mean a lot of things to different people. It can mean something that is essentially a data warehouse on steroids. it can mean something that's more of a sales automation or a kind of CRM system. But Customer 360 is typically the number one, I suppose, kind of what they call horizontal kind of use case that we see across all the customers we work with. And so my challenge really in taking on this presentation was to say, well, from a technical audience that we normally speak to, or at least an audience that wants to know the detail rather than kind of hand wavy stuff, what is Customer 360? What does it involve? What are the particular aspects of the Hadoop platform with big data that makes Customer 360 not only kind of possible, but I suppose what gives it that special kind of element that you couldn't do before with data warehousing, or is it just effectively just kind of hype really? So this session really is to take this concept of Customer 360, and for the people that we normally speak to, what does it mean? How do you do it? And what are some typical kind of use cases really? Okay, so we can do that in this session. As always with this, if you've got any kind of follow-up questions, contact myself, contact our company. We offer sort of solutions around this area. But for me, the key thing was, let's get to the bottom of the kind of Customer 360 kind of hype thing, really. And so really every kind of consultancy, every vendor and so on has a product in this area. Okay, there's a product that we see a lot of called NG Data that's used. It's often sold alongside the Oracle Big Data appliance. It's like a sort of pre-packaged, Customer 360 solution. But everybody has got a solution for this, really. Okay, so you go to Pentaho, you go to IBM, all these companies have something in there. So really, what does it mean and what does it involve and so forth? What does it actually mean? Okay, so you can see how kind of last minute this is. That slide there is in the wrong place. There we go. Okay, and there we go. So there's the thing there. Right, so first of all, let's define what Customer 360 analysis is. Okay, so I suppose there's a fairly common kind of understanding of what this is, and it's about gathering together all meaningful information about the customer that you deal with. Okay, and so really that means everything about the transactions, which is what's typically been the, I suppose, the kind of scope of data warehouses in the past, maybe CRM systems and so on. But also, and this is the kind of crucial thing, also interactions they might have through the new channels you might have. I mean, if you think about, say, a lot of companies I deal with now, I only deal with them via mobile, for example. I only kind of buy, we do our shopping through Ocado in the UK, we do this, we do that. We never set foot in a store. So, all those things there, all of those channels now are very important. But also customers leave footprints and intents and signals across all different sort of like forums and so on. So you've got things like, obviously you have blogs and you've got Twitter and you've got Facebook, the obvious ones. Advertising networks, they track things, which obviously is fairly controversial. All of these things here can be captured either through feeds that you get, or you can go, for example, to like DataSift or Oracle with their data as a service, and you can buy in this data that's missing as well. So the idea is to bring in all of the stuff, the things they do tell you, the things that are very kind of definite because they bought something, the signals they might send on kind of social networks, the things they might do going through, say, a store, bring those together. And what makes this possible now is Hadoop's ability to gather together in an economical basis all of the data you've got, store it in a way that doesn't need everything to be curated on day one properly, so you can load it into what we call a data lake, and then do kind of analysis at scale. So this ability not only to afford to store everything, but to be able to process everything is the kind of new factor really in this. Plus things like segmentation, behavioral analysis, real-time feeds, and so on. These are all things that make this now possible. Okay. And so there was a debate on someone's Facebook page actually a little while ago about this, and was saying, really, isn't this just data warehousing? Haven't we heard this before? Isn't this just data warehousing? And I think that is that was almost my reason for looking at this, really, to say, is this just data warehousing with Twitter feeds, really? And I think, to be fair, it's not. First of all, I have never yet seen a data warehouse one per organization. It's typically multiple data warehouses. That's because of cost. It's because of the fact that it's so, I suppose there's so much effort involved in bringing data onto one of those platforms that they tend to sort of get stale after a while. So a data warehouse typically doesn't contain this scale. The other thing about these kind of Customer 360 stroke Hadoop systems is that you can actually afford just to copy everything onto it. So if you went out and bought a bunch of Teradata servers or whatever, you couldn't just kind of duplicate those and put data on there for the sake of doing this. Excuse me, but Hadoop is so cheap potentially that you can copy everything onto there again and just analyze it in place. Okay, so there are some particular aspects of Hadoop and big data that make this different. The other thing is CRM. So isn't this just CRM or sales automation? And interestingly, again, doing part of the research for this, there's products out there from all the vendors, Salesforce, Oracle, and so on, that says Customer 360, but there's not the same focus on bringing new data in. There's not the same focus on things like machine learning and so on there. This is the difference really. But to be fair, this is really an evolution of those things, not completely different. You can see the roots of Customer 360 in these things here. So let's take a step back, and so we're in this kind of world now of Customer 360, and every marketing seminar and every marketing company will talk about this. But how do we get here? So let's think about, if you think about advertising, and I'm old enough now to remember. I'm not obviously that old. That's very old. But I remember the kind of newspaper adverts and TV adverts in the sort of 70s and 80s, and it was very much you segment maybe by newspaper or by channel. But really beyond that, we all got the same message, really. And so you're broadcasting there. Okay, so that was, I suppose, marketing 1.0. Then we had Web 2.0, which is typically so it's Facebook and Twitter and all this. The point is the consumer had a voice back to the customer. You marketed, but you could get a response back, which was kind of interesting, which made it much more work. But you could have more of a relationship. And the example here, coffee was advertised on just mass market on the left. Then, for example, Starbucks here, invites feedback from customers as to what kind of coffee they'd want in the future, and that's how you end up with the abomination that is the soy sort of frappuccino kind of thing or whatever. But that's kind of a few years ago. Now, I suppose the big thing now is with big data and the profusion of different kind of channels and so on there, is that we can use that to really do, I suppose the kind of the aim of this one-to-one, very almost micro-targeted kind of marketing, really. But there's a cost with all this, really, and it is that consumers really kind of hold the whip hand now in terms of the relationship. So whilst this is great for probably the people on this call who are more implementers and customers, that really this has been driven now by the customer, and the customer expects you to not know things when it suits the customer, but also be utterly aware of what they're doing when it suits them, and that's where this comes in, really. So I suppose, again, backdrop to this again is the staggering amount of data that customers just share with you as kind of organizations, either willingly, unwillingly, overtly, and so on, or unknowingly. So first of all, there's all the channels that you deal with. If you think about the extra data that Uber collects now compared to, say, a cab company in my hometown, Brighton. It doesn't even know. Obviously, Uber knows everywhere you've been. The cab company doesn't even know my name when I ring up. But some of this stuff is obviously posted without the expectation that you're going to use it to market. So you think about all the kind of the kind of no market, no follow kind of flags you can get on browsers now. Think about people who when you post things, you don't necessarily post them expecting to be marketed through there. So there's an element there of don't be creepy, where you can gather stuff in on people, but you've got to use it appropriately, really. A classic one we've had with this is we capture all of the tweets and all the social activity around our website and our name. But if I was to kind of to go to one of those people that mentioned us and try and sell them something, it would be a bit weird because they didn't really intend to kind of get into that sort of relationship with us, really. So how you use this, the kind of don't be creepy kind of line is interesting, really. But the key thing is that there's a lot of data here. You need to understand the purpose it was given for and provide advice when needed. Okay, again, this comes back to Customer 360. The idea is that let's make sure we understand the customer and their intent and their stage in life so that we can market appropriately when it's appropriate. And so the point of all this is to provide a richer customer profile and a signal of intents. And this is really about, I suppose, in a way, and I can never believe this with my bank. I mean, I bank with First Direct, and they still don't seem to market to me any differently than when I was a student. So people expect more these days, and as it said in here, move beyond the transaction and enable engagement to dictate customer experience. This is kind of what it's all about, really. So this is the backdrop, really, to what's driving this, and it's probably one of the first and most kind of, I suppose, well used uses of this technology. The other thing is interesting, and we'll go into some of the detail in the presentation, is around recommendations, personalizations, and so on here. So some of you might know a product called Oracle Real-Time Decisions, and that's been around for a while. It's technically part of the BI. So I think it gets installed with OBI, and that probably introduced a lot of us to the idea of next best offer and personalized offers and so on. So the idea with this, though, is all of these tools, say real-time decisions and various data mining engines and so on, they all need to have a bit of context. They need to understand what stage is the customer at, what have they bought, what are they doing, and so on. So Customer 360 in this context can really help set that context properly. So rather than the context being it's raining today and the customer's approached us with a complaint, you've got a much kind of more granular and rich view of what they're doing. And then the last bit here is around sort of geospatial targeting as well. So it's fairly prevalent now that people expect on their phones, on their devices, to get offers based on where they are, if they go to a particular country or a particular kind of area and so on there. Now, where this gets interesting again is how you respond to these things in real time. So it's all well and good tracking the fact that I'm gone to New York or gone to San Francisco or whatever. There's no point marketing to me a week later on that when I've gone. You need to be able to, and this is where the Hadoop side comes in and some of the other Oracle technologies, you need to be able to respond to these things happening in real time, do things like complex event processing combined with geospatial data and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of technology behind what is essentially a kind of, almost like an IT project, a marketing project. So looking at a customer 360 system, so this is where it gets into the reality here. So what does it look like really? So what is a customer 360 system? So with an Oracle context, we're looking typically at a big data appliance. We're looking at maybe a generic Hadoop platform, a range of ways of getting data into it. And this is where we get things like ODI potentially can be used there. This single customer view is then typically hosted on Hadoop, and then you have various tools running off it here. So in this case here, we've got BI tools, decision engines, and a range of downstream applications. So this is an example of a 360-degree view system. This is a kind of reference architecture from Oracle here. Now, something that's more, I suppose, more kind of real is there's a product called NG Data Lily that a lot of Oracle customers are looking at implementing. I've met the CTO, Open World, and so on. So this is interesting, and it's. I had a chat with the CTO when I was over at San Francisco, and I was trying to understand what is this beyond just some dashboards and so on there. Now, I'm not here to do their job for them selling it, but I get the impression that obviously there's, in terms of a system here, you've got dashboards, you've got screens and so on. But for them, it's this thing they call customer DNA. And it's their ability to define metrics and to bring stuff together in one place. It's become quite popular, really. Now, to be fair, like all package systems, you end up buying it and maybe you use a proportion of it, really. So we when we talk to customers, we typically balance out, do they want something that is kind of out the box, that is a standard solution, or do you want to do something custom build? So we've done a bunch of projects for customers where we've implemented this sort of thing, or we built it from scratch. Okay, so but Lily is an example of a packaged customer 360 system that you can run on Oracle Big Data, with Cloudera and so on there. So getting technical really here, if you're going to build a customer 360 system, what does it really look like? And under the covers, we're getting back to what we talked about in previous weeks, which is this thing called a kind of data lake or data reservoir. So this is a Hadoop-based storage layer that can take data in pretty much any format. And the reason that's important is because if you're going to bring customer data in from all different channels, chances are it's not going to arrive in relational form. It's going to come in the form of XML, it's going to come in the form of JSON, and so on. So really, you want to ideally land it in a form that doesn't require too much work up front, and in a form that is very cheap to store, because you want to keep the most detail that you can. Okay, so then you might take some of that data and feed it into, say, Oracle or something, okay? But the key thing here is probably the Customer 360 layer, the actual kind of raw storage of all the data is going to be on Hadoop using what we call a data lake or a data reservoir. And we've covered this in a few talks in the past. It's fairly kind of known concept, but under the covers, this is what it is. And going back to the question about data warehousing, well, why would you store, if you're going to do a Customer 360 view, why would you store it on Hadoop rather than a relational database? And that's a good question. Really, to my mind, it's this ability to land it in this very kind of raw form. It's the cheapness as well. You know, Oracle or any proprietary database is fairly expensive. If you're going to store lots and lots of raw data, typically you want to do that cheaply. But also it supports the compute and analysis that you want to do. So Hadoop is two kind of things here. It's the cheap, flexible storage, but the ability to then compute on it as well. Okay, so that's why typically we would use that here. So another technology that we see used a lot actually within Customer 360 is these things called NoSQL databases. So this is a kind of subtle difference to Hadoop and to what's called HDFS in the previous bit there. So the storage layer for Hadoop, the HDFS layer, is pretty much just, it's a file system effectively, and you can, as you know, you can store anything in a file system. NoSQL is a little bit more structure, and it allows us to typically ingest at high speed data with very sort of loose kind of schema. But then you've got more ability to do things like kind of create, replace, update, delete, and so on. NoSQL databases like MongoDB, for example, have they're what we call document store databases. So we sometimes see NoSQL being used, but reality is probably a bit of both. You have a bit of HDFS, a bit of kind of JSON, a bit of kind of NoSQL, and so on. But the idea here is you're creating this flexible store, economical store of data that you can put your kind of total customer data set into. So again, go back to NG Data. So what they use in terms of technology here. So going back to the platform here is there's a bunch of there's a bunch of kind of technologies that they would look at here. So we've got, for example, HDFS for storage. We've got things like HBase as well. So HBase is a kind of NoSQL database within the kind of typically within the Cloudera distribution, and gives you a kind of way of storing data and then updating it, deleting it, and so on and so forth. So we typically might store interactions in a very raw form in HDFS, and then eventually archive it off into just raw storage. But then you might use things like Spark Streaming, use Kafka, a decision engine, and so on to do this as well. So the key thing is that all of these kind of Customer 360 systems, they all use kind of the Hadoop kind of base technology under the covers. That technology itself is gradually getting kind of updated over the years to cover things like real time and in memory. But this is typically an example of the kind of platform that either we would build custom or that customers would buy from a company like NG Data. So one of the challenges now, so if you imagine now we've taken data through various feeds into our data lake. That's going to be the key store for our Customer 360 system. And we talked earlier on about the value in this being joining together the different data sets. So the challenge now a little bit is you're going to have all the same issues you have in a data warehouse around data quality, if not worse, because you're deliberately not curating and deliberately storing this data in a raw form. You're going to have more issues with the data for users. If the data coming in from, say, social media is semi-structured, how do you join that to structured data? So how does that kind of work? And so we've been finding that to try and bring this data together, you have a combination of maybe taking it in raw form and processing it into a more kind of structured format. We might use technologies like Apache Hive to add some structure to semi-structured data. We might use a tool like Oracle Big Data Discovery to allow us to join virtually data from two different sources. And there's also a product called Oracle Big Data Preparation Service that came out a little while ago, which is a kind of cloud-based, but it will be on-premise at some point in the future, a cloud-based what they call data preparation tool that uses things like machine learning to help classify and understand data coming in from various sources, and then do things like obfuscate it, identify names and addresses and that sort of thing in there as well. So if you are going to bring data into a data lake for the purposes of Customer 360, a tool like Big Data Preparation Service can really help, because it will automate a lot of the jobs that will be very hard to do if they're largely in the hands of the marketing department, or if they are something you've got to do very manually, really. And again, going back to this concept of bringing data in, and again back to the question about, do we use a data warehouse or not? It's all about, I suppose, as you say in the UK, horses for courses. It's understanding the nature of the data. It's understanding your need for there to be transaction reliability, what's your ingestion rate, and so on. So we typically, when we advise customers on building these sort of systems, we sit down with them and understand what the drivers are for what they're doing, what is the nature of the data, how secure it has to be, and so on. And then we would help them pick a range of technologies to bring this in. Okay, so this is getting into kind of into IT tasks, but there are ways and means in which you can kind of decide this. And I'm sure you've all seen this before, but this is the Oracle reference architecture for big data that we worked with them on recently. And so this kind of platform here, this Customer 360 system, is a good example of where you would have data in production in Hadoop. So the data reservoir, data factory, and enterprise information store are where your Customer 360 data set will live. And the event engine on the left-hand side, that's where your sensor data, your activity, your channel information will come in. Okay. At the bottom there, the discovery lab, well, that's where you work out where the next bit of insight is going to come from. So as stuff comes into the data lake for this, then it obviously needs to be kind of modeled and understood and so on there. The discovery lab is where that is done. The key thing with the discovery lab is it's done outside of IT governance, or typically outside of IT production level controls, so that you can innovate and then push that through to production at the top. And there's I won't cover this too much because I think most of you have seen this, but there's a kind of a data architecture that goes with that reference architecture as well. The idea, the thing here really is that you've again got the raw data reservoir, which is where most of this data would go into. Really, this is your sensor data, your social data, and so on. So this, again, back to kind of IT. This is really the architecture that we typically see to support a Customer 360 system. So the data reservoir is where your most of the incoming low-level detail data is going to come in. You've got your data factory there with your feeds coming in there as well. One of the things, again, to differentiate this from a data warehouse is that by default everything is going to be real time in here. So when you've got, if you're making these next best offers for customers, you need to make the offer when they're actually in a position to take advantage of it. So there is this much more kind of sort of focus really on real time, on using complex event processing, on using things like streaming processing and so forth. So we actually process the data as it comes through, as opposed to doing it in batches later on. So I guess the point with this really is that a Customer 360 system is something that is predicated on your organization having some experience with Hadoop. Okay, so this is the equivalent of, say, BI apps for a customer that's ideally you would have implemented a custom thing before you do BI apps, because then you see the value really. So with this here, you would be the expectation is you'd have some knowledge really of Hadoop to make this work. Okay, although obviously with things like NG Data Solution, it's sold as a kind of packaged one really, so they can, and we could as well. So let's move on here a bit. Right, so this is where it gets interesting. So I said earlier on that most of this is in Hadoop, and I've been talking quite generically about the technologies and tools that we would use. But there's two parts in a Customer 360 system that are quite different to, say, a CRM system or a data warehouse. And so, first of all, it's the platform for advanced analytics. And secondly, it's the event engine. Okay, so we had this earlier on in that architecture slide. So first of all, we've got these tools like Endeca, Advanced Analytics, and so on there. These are the things we can talk about in a moment. These are the tools that are probably more commonly run on Hadoop than on, say, a relational database, although there are options for things like R to run in the database as well. But then what is something that is probably quite different to most people with the data warehousing background is real-time event engines and next best activity. Okay, so these are two parts here that will be fairly new to customers from CRM, from data warehousing, and so on. And so we'll focus on these in the next part of the session. So Oscar, I don't feel like there. Are there any questions so far on anything we've talked about so far that you can sort of pass on? If you're there, Oscar.
We have no active questions right now.
Okay, good. Right, well, not good because you can obviously ask questions, but that's fine. So we're going to focus on advanced analytics and focus on real-time decisions next, because I suppose, they're the thing that really gives this system value beyond just gathering data together. Okay, so its ability to actually kind of come to an insight decision from this, that really is kind of the difference between this and, I suppose, dumb data warehouses and CRM systems. Okay. And so we'll come back to that in a moment. But again, looking back at technical architecture, this is an example here of a technical architecture to implement a Customer 360 system using Oracle Big Data appliance and NG Data Lily. So if you look on the diagram here, we've got sources on the left-hand side, and we've got CRM, we've got consumer payments. So these are all things that are obviously very customer-centric. We've got the Big Data appliance in the center there, and on that you've got Data Integrator running. So something that is coming sort of fairly soon with Data Integrator is Spark streaming support. So that would be another option for real-time ingestion. You've got some tools there for bulk loading as well, and then you've got, in this case, the NG Data product, their Lily Enterprise. But that, in a way, think of this as generic really for any Customer 360 system. It will be an application that runs on Hadoop, typically uses Yarn or something, and that gives you, that's the extra IP, that's the extra bit beyond just storing the data and so on there. But then we've got on the side there, we've got Oracle Data Cloud and Oracle Real-Time Decisions. So Oracle Data Cloud again is interesting because one of the things you're going to find is there will be gaps in the data within your data sets, and you can go to outside providers to help fill that in. So, for example, my bank probably doesn't have some information about my kind of music interests and stuff like that, or what you could deduce my interests and preferences were from the area in Brighton or Hove that I live. So they might go. So, for example, they might go to bureaus in the UK to buy what we call demographic data, but that's moved on now. There are companies like DataSift, there are companies like Oracle themselves who provide this thing called data as a service. The key thing is to use these B2B exchanges to fill in the gaps really in the data that you've got, so you really do have a very kind of comprehensive view of the customer. Okay, so that's in there. Another bit there is real-time decisions as well. So this is where are we here? This is right. So it's a question here. So what will be the question from Preta Kumar? What will be the role of Oracle IoT cloud services in big data area? Okay, so the question there, I suppose there's two parts to that really. So first of all, what will be the role of Oracle cloud services in big data? So I would imagine obviously this Lily thing here is a separate product, but offering a Customer 360 solution in Oracle Cloud will be an obvious thing that Oracle will do at some point, because they have the Big Data Cloud service, they've got a Big Data Prep service, they've got Big Data Discovery in the cloud. I would imagine they will offer something the equivalent of BI apps, but for Customer 360. To answer your question about Oracle IoT Cloud service, so there was an announcement at OpenWorld of Oracle's own Internet of Things cloud service. And let's have a look here. I think I've got the slides on here actually. Let's just see if I've got on here. So here we go. So anyone's interested here, there was, where is it here? There's an IoT something on here anyway. It's, basically this is all about sensor data and so on. So Oracle are offering a product which is about capturing sensor data, presumably obviously into Oracle's own Big Data Cloud service. I would imagine that would link in with this as well. So I don't know particularly what plans they've got around Customer 360 with Oracle IoT Cloud service, but I would imagine Oracle will want to offer a Customer 360 solution in the cloud, and I would imagine they will want to offer an integration point with their Internet of Things service as well. So, but whether that is something that is like now or something that is a long time from now, I don't know. If after the presentation, I'll have a quick look in the slides I've got from OpenWorld, and if there is a section on that, I'll include that as well. But I suppose there's a couple of points here that are worth bearing in mind. First of all, we're talking about Hadoop and kind of JSON and MongoDB and all that. But these are tough skills to recruit for, really. So as we covered in last week's session, there are tools out there that can help us work with this data on Hadoop and make it so we're not just sitting there writing MapReduce code by hand and so on. So the obvious one is this thing called Big Data Discovery. Now this is not a Customer 360 system. So BDD is not a Customer 360 sort of tool, but it is a tool that you might find useful in preparing data to go into your Customer 360 environment. And what it also is potentially useful for is for doing these joins between data sets as well, and then maybe even exporting those back into Hive at the end as well. So say one of the challenges from data integration earlier is that if you're trying to join data that is very loosely arranged around a schema, how do you do that really? But Big Data Discovery has tools to help you do that. So this is something again that could be useful for you in meeting that goal of integrating data across the kind of whole customer profile. But really, what is interesting here again is how much of a partnership this would have to be between IT and the business to make work. So most Customer 360 projects that get traction that I see start off as something in marketing or sales automation. So they're always trying to build a single customer view. That's fairly kind of obvious, but the data they're going to look at is going to expand and expand. They're going to obviously want to cover different channels. At some point, somebody within marketing is going to say, I've read about Customer 360, about Hadoop, can we bring that in? But actually, this is also very much an IT type project as well, because if we are going to create a single customer store of data, we need to really be on the ball for things like governance, security, and so on. We need to think about how we're going to do the integration, the virtualization, and so on. We need to obviously build out and provision things like Hadoop and NoSQL. And we also need to make sure it integrates in with everything else, because it's all well and good to build a system that meets a real kind of need in the marketing department. But if it's a complete silo of data compared to everything else, then it's not going to you're not going to get maximum value from that in time. So a couple of things here. What's the time now? It's 1:45. So a couple of technology pieces and functional areas that again are fairly unique to this solution are real-time decisioning and predictive modeling. Okay, so first of all, it's really important that not only do you capture this data, but you analyze it and take action on it. And one of the most obvious uses of this data within marketing and selling is what they call next best offer, really. So as I said, there's a tool out there from Oracle called Real-Time Decisions that is used commonly for this type of thing. Again, where Customer 360 data, where this much more kind of rich and detailed level data can be useful for decisioning, is really getting down to kind of very low levels of granularity, micro-segmentation, all this kind of stuff really here. So multi-contextual recommendations. So you typically find that most Customer 360 systems have a decision engine in there somewhere. And in the past we've used real-time decisions, and I think there's one example here. So we did some work a while ago with an insurance company where we built out a 360-degree view of the customer for them, and then we attached real-time decisions to it, which is Oracle's decisioning engine, and it computed models in real time, it did optimization, next best offer, and so on. The key thing here again was this much much wider and richer view of who the customer was, okay, coupled with a real-time decision ending, so it's real-time data loading and then real-time decisioning as well. These are the things that really made this possible, really. And in terms of models, we use things like Bayesian, there's various kind of models and types we used in this here, really. But combining real-time decisions with a data lake of data, that was really useful for them. The other thing here is what's called intelligent marketing. So what this comes down to is really trying to create a detailed persona and microsegments for customers. So think about me. If you think about myself, I'm 48. I work. I've work in an IT company, you do traveling and whatever. But I am probably quite different to John Mead, who and Oscar, who's on this call now. We're all, I don't know how old Oscar is. He's probably younger than me, but I think that you might, in the old days, we all would have got Compute magazine, for example, each week with all the jobs in and so on. But really, we'd have very different tastes and interests and things and so on. And if you were to track what John Mead spends his money on compared to what I spend it on, then they're quite different, really. So these kind of, this ability to do micro segmentation and understanding of things is kind of very important. So there's a question from another question from Pratik Kumar. I'll answer that in a second, Pratik, because it's slightly kind of off topic for this bit here. But and so again, the technologies you use here are things that are typically very well suited to running on Hadoop, and one that we see a lot of now is this thing called Spark ML. Okay, so Spark is the poster child now, I suppose, for big data in terms of in-memory processing and so on. It's generally considered to be the replacement to MapReduce, for example. But there's actually a machine learning library called Spark ML that comes with it that can do statistical analysis, segmentation, and so on at a massive scale. Okay, and at the recent Spark conference in the States, there was a Toyota Customer 360 presentation on, at that session, at that conference on Apache Spark for what they do. Okay, so Toyota, obviously, like I actually used to work for Toyota years ago, fair enough, and they're very obsessive about understanding the engineering in their cars. And funny enough, at home we've got a Lexus and we've got a Range Rover, and my wife's Lexus has never had any engineering work done to it in like 7 years. My Range Rover, bits are falling off it all the time, so that's kind of interesting. But Toyota, they're very obsessive about this, and there's a great presentation they did on Customer 360, which I can point you to maybe as part of the notes for this thing here. But they use compute, streaming, and machine learning to come out with actionable insights about their customers and their cars and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things they talked about there was this idea of a social ML pipeline. So they would approach customers in various forums. They would then build training sets with that and so on. They use various kind of like models and n-grams and stemming and all this kind of stuff here to try and understand what customers feel about their products and their services and so on there. And it's a very interesting example, really, of a quite a technical implementation of Customer 360 using probably quite a sort of a subset of the total set of tools. So in this case, it was largely Spark, really, and probably Mesos and so on. But they did this. They managed to bring it all together and use these kind of tools to run at a very, very large scale. Think how many kind of drivers there are, customers of Toyota. So this is a great example here, really, of kind of using these quite kind of complex machine learning kind of algorithms against this kind of combined data set. So the question I had a minute ago from Pratik was, with so many open source technologies in the market for big data, what are the probable justification for proposing licensed product in big data other than support benefits? Blimey. Okay, so obviously this session is also sponsored by Oracle, so and ourselves as well. And it's so Pratik's question is saying, really, why would we go out and buy some of this stuff from, say, Oracle, as opposed to getting it all for free? The way I see of it is Oracle's products in the big data space are not probably the things you would use on day one. So they're not things that big data SQL, you need to understand why you need big data SQL before you see the value. With the big data appliance, again, these are all things, what Oracle do very, very well is industrialize and make kind of enterprise kind of scale and compatible big data, really. So things like big data SQL, big data discovery, all these things are about the third or fourth or fifth stage in a journey you might go on. They really take it, they build on the open source technologies, and they make it so it runs properly at scale within your organization. And it also yes, I was reading another question there, sorry. The other thing really is the integration with everything else as well. So if you are largely an Oracle shop and you use OBI, use ODI, all that kind of stuff, there's obviously benefits in doing that as well. Having said that, being honest, this thing here from Toyota, this is all built on Spark here, but I bet you there's something behind there. There's probably Oracle may be behind there as well that are integrating it with everything else. I would imagine because it was a Spark conference, they focus on Spark, but actually typically anyone doing this at scale would be using, would be running it on proper hardware and so on. So there's a question as well, which was Lawrence Green asks, any Oracle products that would satisfy the intelligent marketing through machine learning, predictive modeling, rather than relying on Spark ML. So back to the slide here, which was intelligent marketing. Okay, so you called me out there, Lawrence, on the one thing that isn't a product. So this is stuff that is so context for this again is some of the vertical teams within Oracle are building out solutions around big data appliance with partners like us and so on to add these things in there. Okay, so there isn't a product as such out there at the moment. I think big data discovery is starting to going to start to add in some machine learning capabilities and so on. But these are things typically at the moment that are being added by partners and ISVs really at the moment. I would imagine there'll be features within Oracle's own marketing products. And if we go back to the architecture slide that I had earlier on here, here it is here. So if you look at this one here, so we've got Oracle Marketing Cloud. So I would imagine this is where you're going to find these things coming in. So RTD plus that would be, so RTD would give you the segments, which then feed into Marketing Cloud and so on. So there probably are bits there. They're not an integrated, there's not a one, it's not a kind of end-to-end solution, but you've got bits in there, real-time decisions and so on. But that is where we start to see partners like us kind of adding value in there really. Right, okay, so almost up for time now. So there's 2 slides here really to kind of talk about. So first of all, everything we've said here though is about innovation, and I would typically, things like NG Data, Lily, that they're great, but even more so than say the BI apps, customers implement them and they're great, but they immediately realize what else they need. So we typically advocate working as a partnership with the business, with kind of marketing, for example, in customers, and first of all piloting stuff outside of a package tool. And working as a partnership really. Technology is good, but technology isn't the reason we're doing this. Architecture there is to support things, it's not to kind of hinder things, and it's about innovation again as well. So if you listen to my presentations on architecture before, we talk about the innovation lab, we talk about how there's a distinction between innovation and delivery and so forth. The key thing here really is about, I suppose, start small, understand what is driving customer interactions, how are the ways that customers kind of work, what are the channels they use and so on. Let that drive it, but make IT be an enabler rather than a hinderer. And the end objective really here is to create an intelligent customer experience here. So using Customer 360, predictive analytics, next best action, and these are all things that as partners we do. So if any of you are interested here, we built these for customers. We work, we actually work with NG Data as well. We work with Oracle. We work with Cloudera. We built these things out before Customer 360 was a buzzword. We built them out now, whilst it's now a buzzword. This is stuff that people are doing this now. The other thing really to bear in mind is it's not really an option not to do it, because there is an expectation now from customers that they drive the relationship, that about them, what's needed and so on there. The technology is pretty mature now. Hadoop is not something that is too cutting edge. You should be able to put it in with a partner like us and so on. But customers expect more these days, really, from organisations. And this, I suppose, really is a nice way of ending these 3 webcasts, because it's a real concrete use case, a real concrete example of where big data can help you do things you couldn't do before. You couldn't capture the level of granularity that you could before. You couldn't store it economically. You couldn't process it at the volume that you would have to do here now, really. So this is a really nice example, I think, of where big data is a real differentiator compared to the world of just relational storage and so on before. So that kind of, I think, kind of wraps it up. Let's have a look here. So the time is almost on the hour, actually. So so thank you very much. Oscar, is there any more questions at all from anybody on here?
No.
Okay,
questions.
That's good. So Oscar, I think what we'll do is we'll put the slides up on here afterwards. Thank you very much, everybody, for bearing with us while I was kind of trying to get everything together. I wanted to make sure I had all the content for you, because there's a lot of stuff in here. It's a very wide area, but I want to try and boil it down for you to the key things, really. Okay, so thank you very much for listening in. I will put the slides up on SlideShare. We'll put the video up on YouTube. I think there's going to be a page on our website soon that summarises all this stuff. And Oscar, thank you very much for sort of hosting this for me and for keeping everybody busy while I was just finishing off the slides at the last minute. Okay, thank you.